Hi, I'm Nancy Lyell, and we're talking about The Fox Bride, Briarlore book number 2. One of the major influences of this book is the Swan Maiden motif. It's a really old motif that has been used in folklore for centuries, telling the story of usually a woman who maybe has some friends, handmaidens with her, who is able to shift into a swan, and she takes off her feathered cloak or some other item of clothing in order to take a bath in a river or a lake or some, body of water. And a man will walk by, sometimes depicted as a hunter, and he will see them bathing, fall in love with one of the swan maidens, and will steal her cloak in order to ensure that she cannot return to her animal form. And at that point, he's able to coerce her into marrying him. There are all different ways this story can go. In many of them, the two will have children. And at some point, the children become old enough and aware enough to start to ask questions and wonder, why is their mother crying all the time? Why is she so sad? And eventually they learn about this lost skin or cloak or pelt or whatever that has been hidden from her by her husband, the children's father. And in some versions they will sing a song, and the song will magically reveal to them where this cloak has been hidden. In other versions they just go and find the cloak and return it to their mother, and the mother is grateful, but she will put her cloak back on, or her skin, or her pelt, and return to her home, usually without her children. There's all different kinds of versions of this story and different ways they can end. Sometimes the husband will go after her and be heartbroken because he can't find her. Sometimes he will be able to find her. Other times he doesn't figure in the end of the story at all. There's a lot of different versions. You might even recognize that Swan Lake is a version of this story, except that in that story, the women are cursed to become a swan, instead of just that being a natural part of their ability to shift. So what's interesting to me is that these stories are about obsession, desire, stealing something so critical to someone's soul in order to make them stay in a love relationship that probably isn't really love. And this is something I talk about a lot. I love the theme of obsession and desire. It comes up in a lot of my books, and I'll talk about that in another video. But I'm particularly interested in the idea of a man imposing his will upon a woman and taking something from her that alters her ability to be the sovereign of her own life. Now in The Fox Bride, I've turned it on its head just a little bit, because Fionn is the one who is the hunter, in a sense. Obviously, she's also the Swan Maiden, but think about this, that in folk tales, in fairy tales, we're asked to look at ourselves through the lens of all the characters. We're not just there to be represented by one. So Fionn is both the Swan Maiden and the hunter. She is taking her own cloak, her own skin away from herself in order to be united in a love relationship with William. She, in a sense, takes away her own sovereignty. It is her choice. But what is the ultimate price of that? What is she really giving up? And what happens to her because of the choice that she's making? I also am really interested in the idea here in particular within this motif of what happens to a woman in these situations. What happens when she is domesticated? What happens when she is taken by a man into a domesticated situation like wifehood? When she used to be a wild creature, what happens to her heart? What happens to her soul? What happens to her life? Can she survive that? What happens to a woman when she is tamed, in other words? I'm absolutely fascinated by these questions because I feel in so many areas of my life that I've tried to tame myself. I feel like I've had men in my life who have tried to domesticate me. And it's a really difficult journey to find that balance of how you want to live in the human world and in the wild world, because we do live in a world where we have certain cultural expectations that are tame and domestic, but we are animals. We are animals. We belong to the animal kingdom. We are mammals. And I always am surprised when people talk about animals as something out there instead of part of who we are. The only reason we do that is because we have separated ourselves from the wild world. And that to me is a whole other fascinating theme to explore. And that is another part of the Fox Bride, that Fionn leaves this wild world of the forest, this wild world of an untamed life, an untamed environment, and puts herself into a world where she has to wear dresses and corsets and learn how to sew and learn how to cook and learn how to be quiet and sit by the fire and sip tea and follow the rules of courtship that don't apply to her world. What does that mean? What does that do to us as women, as wild women? So that's something that was really important for me to explore in The Fox Bride, and I'd love to hear your ideas about it.